Captain Daniel Carter stood at the main window of the Earth defense vessel Horizon and watched something that made his blood run cold. 300 alien warships had just appeared in the sky above Earth. They came out of nowhere like ghosts becoming solid. One moment the space around the planet was empty and calm. The next moment it was filled with massive ships that blocked out the stars. Each vessel was at least 5 times larger than anything humans had ever built. Their hulls were dark and covered with strange symbols that glowed with a purple light. The ships moved into position around Earth like predators surrounding wounded prey. Daniel had been in the military for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. He was 42 years old with gray starting to show in his dark hair. His hands gripped the edge of the control panel in front of him, hard enough to make his knuckles turn white. Around him on the bridge, his crew moved quickly between their stations. Everyone was trying to look calm, but Daniel could see the fear in their eyes. Commander Lisa Raymond came to stand beside him. She was his second in command and had served with him for 7 years. Lisa was a tall woman with red hair tied back in a tight bun. Her green eyes were focused on the alien fleet outside. She did not say anything at first. There was nothing to say that would make this situation better. Down on Earth at the command headquarters building, Admiral Patricia Cole sat in her office and stared at the communication screen. She was waiting for the aliens to make contact. Patricia was 55 years old and had spent her entire adult life in the service. She had fought in 3 wars and helped negotiate 2 peace treaties. She had dealt with terrorists and pirates and rogue nations, but she had never dealt with aliens before. Nobody on Earth had. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was not the friendly greeting everyone had hoped for. The screen flickered and then filled with an image that made several people in the room step backward. The creature that appeared was massive and reptilian. Its scales were a deep red color and its eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils. The alien wore armor that seemed to be made from some kind of metal that shifted colors in the light. Behind it, Patricia could see other aliens moving around on what must be the bridge of their ship. The creature opened its mouth and spoke. The words came out in a language that sounded like rocks grinding together, but somehow the computers translated it into English. The voice that came through the speakers was deep and full of authority that expected to be obeyed without question. My name is Ambassador Zekthar, and I speak for the Galactic Council. Your species has been observed and evaluated. You are hereby notified that Earth now falls under Council jurisdiction. You will provide tribute as all species must. The terms are simple and not open to discussion. You will give 50% of all resources your planet produces each year. You will provide 20% of your population to serve as workers in Council territories. You will accept Council governors who will oversee your world and ensure compliance. You have 72 hours to signal your acceptance and begin preparations. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is not a negotiation. This is the way things are done in the galaxy. Every species that has joined the Council started this way. You are not special and you will not be treated differently. The transmission ended and the screen went black. Patricia sat very still in her chair. Around her, the other officers and advisors began talking all at once. Some were angry and some were frightened and some were both. Patricia raised her hand and everyone fell silent. She looked at the empty screen for another moment and then turned to face her staff. Lieutenant Stephen Brooks was the first to speak. He was young and had only been assigned to headquarters 6 months ago. His voice shook slightly when he asked the obvious question. Can we fight them, Admiral? Patricia looked at Commander Karen Phillips, who was in charge of intelligence. Karen was already pulling up data on her tablet computer. She had been analyzing the alien ships from the moment they appeared. The news was not good. Their technology is far beyond ours. Each of those ships has weapons that could level entire cities in seconds. Their shields could probably withstand every nuclear weapon we have. In a direct fight, we would last maybe an hour before Earth was destroyed. The room fell silent again. Everyone was thinking the same thing. They had no choice. They would have to surrender, but Patricia was not ready to give up yet. She stood up from her chair and walked to the window that looked out over the city. Below her, millions of people were going about their day. Most of them probably did not even know about the alien fleet yet. The government had not made an announcement. There had not been time. Patricia thought about her daughter Helen, who lived in New York with her granddaughter. She thought about all the families on Earth who would be torn apart if 20% of the population was taken away. She thought about the children who would grow up as slaves on alien worlds. She thought about what would happen to human civilization if half of everything they made was stolen every year. Get me a line to every world leader. We need an emergency meeting of the United Nations. We have 72 hours to decide the future of our species, and I will not make that decision alone. The staff jumped into action. Within minutes, calls were going out to every nation on Earth. Presidents and prime ministers and kings and chancellors all received the same message. Humanity faced its first contact with alien life, and that contact had come in the form of a threat. On the bridge of the horizon, Daniel Carter received orders to hold position and await further instructions. He looked out at the alien fleet and wondered what kind of beings would travel across the stars just to enslave others. He wondered if there was any way to fight them. He wondered if humanity would choose to fight or to kneel. In cities around the world, people began to notice the ships in the sky. News networks interrupted their regular programming. Social media exploded with images and videos. Parents held their children close. Religious leaders tried to calm their followers. Scientists stared through telescopes in amazement and horror. In Tokyo, engineer Kevin Yamamoto stopped working and went to the window of his office. He could see one of the alien ships hanging in the sky like a dark moon. In London, teacher Paul Henderson stood in front of his classroom and tried to explain to the children what was happening without frightening them too much. In Mexico City, Dr. Maria Santos looked up from her patient and wondered if any of this would matter in 72 hours. The clock was counting down, and humanity had to make a choice. The emergency session of the United Nations began exactly 4 hours after the alien transmission ended. The massive chamber in New York was filled with representatives from every nation on Earth. Normally, these meetings took weeks to organize, but today, everyone had dropped everything and rushed to attend. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and every leader knew it. Secretary General Linda Morris stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. She was a woman from Canada who had spent 20 years working in international diplomacy. She had helped negotiate treaties and resolve conflicts between nations. But this was different. This was not about borders or trade agreements. This was about whether humanity would exist as a free species or become slaves to an alien empire. We all know why we are here. We have been given an ultimatum by beings we did not even know existed until today. We have 72 hours to decide our response. I open the floor for discussion. Ambassador Gregory Foster from the United States was the first to stand. He was a short man with glasses and a nervous habit of adjusting his tie. His voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the strain in it. We need more information. We cannot make a decision without understanding who these aliens are and what they truly want. I propose we try to negotiate. Perhaps the terms can be changed. Perhaps we can offer something else instead of our people and our resources. Ambassador Chen Wei from China stood next. He was older than Gregory, with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes. His voice was harder and more direct. Negotiate with what leverage? They have 300 warships in orbit and we have nothing that can touch them. We are not in a position to bargain. We need to think about survival. If we refuse, they will destroy us. Is pride worth the death of every person on this planet? The chamber erupted with voices as delegates began arguing with each other. Some agreed with Chen Wei that survival was more important than freedom. Others insisted that life under alien rule would not be worth living. Ambassador Maria Santos from Brazil stood and waited for the noise to die down. She was a grandmother with 4 children and 9 grandchildren. Her voice shook with emotion when she spoke. You talk about survival as if it means something when they will take our children. 20% of our population. Do you understand what that means? Every 5th person you see on the street will be taken away. Families will be destroyed. Children will be stolen from their parents. How is that survival? Up in orbit on the horizon, Captain Daniel Carter listened to the broadcast of the United Nations session. His science officer, Lieutenant Nicole Adams, sat at her station running analysis after analysis on the alien fleet. Nicole was 30 years old and had been the top of her class at the academy. She was brilliant with technology, and right now she was trying to find any weakness in the alien ships. The results were not encouraging. She turned to Daniel with a grim expression on her face. Captain, I have completed the scan of their vessels. Their technology is approximately 200 years ahead of ours in every category. Their weapons use directed energy that can punch through our strongest armor like paper. Their shields operate on principles we do not fully understand. Their engines can move ships that size at speeds we cannot match. In a direct military engagement, we would be destroyed in minutes, not hours. Daniel felt his stomach sink, but he kept his expression neutral. His crew needed to see confidence even if he did not feel it. What about unconventional approaches? What if we do not fight them ship to ship? Nicole thought about that for a moment. We could potentially use guerrilla tactics. Hit-and-run attacks. Target their supply lines if they have any. Use our smaller size to our advantage. But Captain, even with the best tactics, the odds are still heavily against us. Down in the command headquarters bunker, General Christopher Lee was having a similar conversation with his top military advisors. Christopher was a career soldier who had seen combat in multiple conflicts. He was not a man who scared easily, but even he felt the weight of what they were facing. Colonel Amanda Price sat across from him with tactical maps spread out on the table between them. Amanda was an expert in asymmetric warfare and had spent years studying how small forces could fight larger ones. We cannot match them in conventional combat, but we do not have to. Throughout history, smaller forces have defeated larger ones by refusing to fight on the enemy's terms. We use ambush tactics. We make them pay for every inch of ground. We target their command structure. We make occupation so costly that they decide it is not worth the effort. Commander Eric Stone nodded in agreement. He was in charge of naval operations and had experience with submarine warfare. The same principles apply in space. We use stealth. We hide among the debris and asteroids. We strike when they are not expecting it and disappear before they can respond. Major Lisa Campbell added her thoughts. She was an intelligence officer who specialized in psychological operations. We also need to think about their morale. They are used to species surrendering without a fight. What happens when we refuse? What happens when we make them bleed? Maybe they are not as unified as they appear, but not everyone in the military was optimistic about their chances. Admiral Richard Hayes sat at the end of the table with his arms crossed. He was older than the others and had fought in more wars than he cared to remember. He had seen what happened when leaders let pride override common sense. His voice was quiet, but everyone listened when he spoke. You're all talking about tactics and strategies as if we have a real chance. We do not. Even if we use every trick we know, we might destroy a few of their ships. Maybe 10 or 20 if we are very lucky. They have 300. And when we fail and they start bombing our cities, what then? How many millions will die because we chose to fight a war we cannot win? The room fell silent. Nobody had a good answer to that question. Back at the United Nations, the debate continued. Economic advisor Ryan Turner presented data showing that losing 50% of Earth's resources would cause complete economic collapse. Every nation would fall into depression. Millions would starve. Infrastructure would crumble. But sociologist Jennifer Mills pointed out that losing 20% of the population would be even worse. The psychological trauma alone would destroy human civilization from within. Philosophy professor Andrew Barnes stood and offered a different perspective. He was a thin man with white hair who taught at a university in Boston. He spoke slowly and carefully, choosing each word. Perhaps we are asking the wrong question. We debate whether we can win a war or survive under their rule. But we should ask what kind of species we want to be. Do we want to be the kind of beings who surrender our freedom to save our lives? Or do we want to be the kind who fight even when the odds are impossible? History will judge us not by whether we survive, but by what we were willing to sacrifice for our principles. Some delegates nodded at his words. Others shook their heads in frustration. The clock continued to count down. 48 hours remained. Around the world, ordinary people watched the news and tried to understand what was happening. Parents made plans to hide their children if the worst came. Religious leaders prayed for guidance. Scientists worked frantically to find some technological solution that did not exist. On the bridge of the horizon, Daniel Carter looked out at the alien fleet and made a decision. He could not control what the politicians decided, but he could make sure his ship and his crew were ready for whatever came next. He turned to his crew and saw the same determination in their eyes. They were scared, but they were ready. Whatever humanity decided, they would face it together. 12 hours remained before the deadline when Admiral Patricia Cole called the final meeting. The secure bunker beneath command headquarters was designed to survive nuclear war, and it now held the most important gathering in human history. Presidents and prime ministers had flown in from every corner of the globe. Military leaders stood beside civilian advisors. Scientists sat next to philosophers. Everyone who had a voice in deciding humanity's future was in that room. The air was thick with tension and the weight of what they had to choose. Patricia stood at the head of the long table and looked at each face. She had not slept in 2 days. None of them had. They had spent every hour debating and arguing and searching for some third option that did not exist. But time had run out. They had to decide now whether humanity would bow or stand. She cleared her throat and the room fell silent. Everyone knew this was the moment. We have heard every argument and examined every possibility. We know the risks of both choices. If we submit, we survive but lose our freedom. If we fight, we may die, but we die as free beings. There is no middle ground. The aliens made that clear. So now we must vote, but before we do, I want to say something. Patricia paused and gathered her thoughts. She thought about her own daughter and granddaughter. She thought about every child on Earth and what kind of world they would inherit. She thought about all the humans who had come before and fought for freedom against impossible odds. She thought about what it meant to be human. Throughout our history, we have faced tyrants and conquerors. Some of our ancestors chose to submit and live under oppression. Others chose to fight even when victory seemed impossible. We remember both, but we honor those who stood up when it mattered most. The ones who said no when everyone expected them to kneel. I cannot tell you what to choose. This decision is too important for one person, but I can tell you what I believe. I believe that a life lived in chains is not worth living. I believe that our children deserve to inherit a free world, even if we have to die to give it to them. I believe that we should fight. President Elizabeth Morgan of the United States spoke next. She was a tall woman with gray hair, who had led her nation through economic crisis and natural disasters. Her voice was strong and clear. I agree with Admiral Cole. My country was founded by people who chose freedom over safety. They fought against an empire that had every advantage. They suffered and died, but they won. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to give up. I vote that we fight. Prime Minister Jonathan Clark from the United Kingdom nodded slowly. His nation had stood alone against tyranny once before and survived. We have faced this choice before in our history. We chose to fight then, and we will choose to fight now. I vote that we resist. Chancellor Sophie Weber from Germany spoke with tears in her eyes. Her country knew the cost of both tyranny and resistance better than most. My people have lived under oppression. We know what it does to the soul. We also know what it takes to break free. It is better to die fighting than to live as slaves. I vote that we fight. One by one, the leaders voiced their decision. President Carlos Mendoza from Mexico, Prime Minister Rachel Singh from India, President Jacob Nielsen from Denmark, President Alan Foster from Canada. Every single person in that room chose the same thing. They would resist. They would fight. They would tell the aliens no. The vote was unanimous, and Patricia felt something shift in the room. Fear was still there, but it was mixed now with determination. They had made their choice, and now they had to see it through. She turned to the communications console and opened a channel to Captain Daniel Carter on the horizon. Captain Carter, this is Admiral Cole. Prepare to transmit our response to the Galactic Council. One word. Make sure they understand it perfectly. Daniel stood on the bridge of his ship and felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. He looked at his crew and saw the same emotions reflected in their faces. Commander Lisa Raymond stood at his side with her jaw set and her eyes hard. Tactical Officer Lieutenant Marcus Flynn had his hands on the weapons controls ready for what would come next. Communications Officer Lieutenant Beth Taylor waited at her station with her fingers hovering over the console. Compose the message. One word in every language we know. Send it on all frequencies so every ship in their fleet receives it. Beth worked quickly, and within minutes the message was ready. It was simple and clear and would change everything. She looked up at Daniel and waited for his order. He took a deep breath and nodded. Send it. The transmission burst out from the horizon and from every other human vessel in orbit. It traveled through space at the speed of light and reached the alien fleet in seconds. In the command chamber of the Council flagship, Ambassador Zekthar lounged on his throne. He had been waiting for Earth's surrender with bored confidence. His aide Plix monitored the communications station. The small creature suddenly chittered in surprise and confusion. Ambassador, we are receiving their response now. Excellent. Prepare to begin tribute collection operations. I want their governments to understand that compliance will be rewarded with mercy." The transmission opened, and the face of Admiral Patricia Cole appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. She stared directly at the camera and spoke one word. Her voice was calm and firm and left no room for misunderstanding. "No." The transmission ended and silence filled the Council flagship. Plick stared at the blank screen with its mouth hanging open. Zekthar sat frozen on his throne. His yellow eyes widened in shock. For 30 years he had served the Galactic Council. For 30 years he had delivered the tribute demand to newly discovered species. Every single one had surrendered. Some took days to decide. Some took only hours. But they all surrendered eventually. No species had ever refused. No species had ever been foolish enough or brave enough to say no. They refused. Plix's voice was barely a whisper. "They actually refused us." Zekthar felt anger rising in his chest. How dare these primitive creatures defy the Council? How dare they reject the offer of membership even as slaves? He stood from his throne and his massive form seemed to fill the chamber. His claws extended and his scales darkened with rage. "Send the message to all Council ships. Prepare for immediate assault. These humans will learn what happens to those who defy us. We will destroy their military. We will burn their cities. We will leave just enough survivors to serve as a warning to every other species in the galaxy. The Council does not accept refusal." The Council fleet moved into attack formation. Weapon systems powered up with enough energy to scorch continents. Shields activated, creating shimmering barriers around each ship. 300 warships prepared to rain destruction on the planet below. On Earth, people watched the sky and knew what was coming. Parents held their children. Soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots climbed into their fighters. Everyone who could contribute to the defense prepared to do their part. In New York, Helen Martinez hugged her daughter and whispered that everything would be all right, even though she did not believe it. In Tokyo, Kevin Yamamoto put on his engineering uniform and reported to his station. In London, Paul Henderson sent his students home and then went to join the Civilian Defense Force. On the horizon, Daniel Carter looked at his crew one last time before the battle began. They were scared, but they were ready. They had made their choice and they would see it through to the end, whatever that end might be. All ships moved to defensive positions. Activate all weapon systems. Prepare for combat. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. The alien fleet began its descent toward Earth and humanity rose to meet them. The battle for freedom was about to begin. The first wave of Council ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling meteors. Their hulls glowed red from the friction, but their shields kept them perfectly safe. Ambassador Zekthar watched from his flagship with cold satisfaction. He had ordered his commanders to target military installations first, and then move on to the largest cities. The humans needed to learn their lesson quickly and harshly. No species defied the Council and survived to tell about it. Destroy their defenses and leave the population centers intact for now. I want them to watch their protectors fall. I want them to understand that resistance is futile. Captain Daniel Carter saw the alien ships coming and gave the order that would start the battle. All ships execute dispersal pattern Omega. Do not group together, make them chase us. The human fleet scattered in dozens of different directions. To the Council commanders it looked like panic and cowardice. They laughed at the disorganized retreat and split their own forces to pursue the fleeing vessels. But this was exactly what Daniel wanted. The humans were not running away. They were drawing the enemy into a trap. Commander Lisa Raymond coordinated the counterattack from her station. Fire control, this is command. Activate all hidden platforms on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. All across Earth's orbit, weapons platforms that had been floating dark and silent suddenly came to life. Humanity had spent the last 72 hours not preparing to surrender, but preparing for war. Every satellite had been converted into a weapon. Every piece of space debris had been rigged with explosives. Every defense station had been moved into position. Now they all fired at once. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the Council ships from 100 different directions. Kinetic weapons traveling at incredible speed slammed into shields. Laser batteries hidden on the dark side of the moon opened fire. The Council fleet suddenly found itself under attack from every angle. They had expected a brief fight against primitive weapons. Instead, they were caught in a deadly crossfire. Lieutenant Marcus Flynn watched his tactical display with fierce joy. 3 enemy ships showing damage. Their shields were not expecting attacks from multiple vectors, switching targets to the wounded vessels. The human strategy was simple and brutal. They were not trying to fight with honor or follow the rules of warfare that the Council expected. They were using every dirty trick and underhanded tactic that humanity had ever invented. When a Council ship's shields weakened, they focused all fire on that one target until it was destroyed. When enemy ships grouped together, the humans mined the space around them and detonated the mines when they tried to move. When the Council tried to establish formation, the humans jammed their communications and caused confusion. On Earth's surface, General Christopher Lee directed the ground-based defenses. He stood in a command bunker deep underground and watched multiple screens showing the battle. Colonel Amanda Price was with him coordinating the atmospheric fighters. Laser batteries fire at will. Railgun platforms target the descending ships. Make them pay for every meter they come closer. Hidden batteries in mountain ranges opened fire. The massive railguns hurled metal projectiles at speeds that made them nearly impossible to dodge. Some shots bounced harmlessly off Council shields, but others found weak points and punched through. One alien ship took a railgun round directly in its engine core and exploded in a ball of green fire. The debris rained down into the ocean. Colonel Amanda Price led squadrons of small atmospheric fighters into battle. Her pilots flew craft that were tiny compared to the alien vessels, but they were fast and maneuverable. They swarmed around the larger ships like angry insects. Target their sensor arrays first. Blind them. Then go for the weapon ports and engine exhausts. The fighters dove and weaved through space. They fired missiles at close range and then darted away before the aliens could return fire. When a Council ship tried to swat them with point defense weapons, the fighters split up and attacked from different angles. They were too small and too quick for the alien targeting systems that were designed to fight other capital ships. Ambassador Zekthar watched his tactical display with growing fury and disbelief. His fleet was taking casualties. Not many, but more than he had ever seen from a newly contacted species. Ships reported damage to sensors and weapons. 2 vessels had been destroyed completely. The humans were fighting with tactics that the Council had banned 10,000 years ago. They showed no honor and no mercy. They attacked wounded ships instead of giving them a chance to retreat. They used suicide runs and false surrenders. They mined debris fields and hacked into communications. How are these primitives doing this? Zekthar roared at his tactical officer. They should not even understand our technology. Krell studied the data with growing respect for the enemy. They are not trying to understand our technology. They are using tactics we forgot existed. Kamikaze attacks, ambush strategies. They fight without honor, but they fight effectively. Then we respond with overwhelming force. Activate the planet killer weapons. Charge the main cannons. We will show them what happens when they resist the Council. The flagship began charging its massive main weapon. The cannon could destroy entire continents with a single shot. But as the power built up, something appeared on the tactical display. A small human vessel was approaching at high speed. It was badly damaged and venting atmosphere, but it was accelerating directly toward the flagship. Inside that small ship, Lieutenant Commander Scott Peterson sat alone in the cockpit. He was 35 years old and had a wife and 2 sons waiting for him back on Earth. He knew he would never see them again. His ship, the Corvette Freedom, had taken heavy damage in the first minutes of battle. Life support was failing and the engines were barely functioning. But he still had one thing that worked: the payload bay full of nuclear warheads that his ship had been carrying. Scott had volunteered for this mission when Admiral Cole asked for someone to make a one-way trip. He understood what it meant. He would not be coming home. But if his sacrifice could make a difference, then it was worth it. He thought about his sons and hoped they would understand someday why their father had to do this. For Earth. For my family. For everyone who comes after us. He pushed the engines to maximum and the Freedom shot forward. The Council flagship's point defense systems opened fire, but Scott weaved between the shots. Alarm screamed in his cockpit. The hull was coming apart, but he was close now, so close. The flagship's shields were directly in front of him and he aimed for the exact center. The Freedom slammed into the shields at full speed, and for a moment, nothing happened. The shields held. But then the nuclear warheads in Scott's ship detonated all at once. The combined explosion was equivalent to 50 megatons. The shields were designed to stop attacks from outside, but the explosion happened right against them. The energy had nowhere to go but through. The shield generators overloaded. Power conduits exploded throughout the flagship. The main cannon that had been charging suddenly discharged in a random direction. The massive blast missed Earth, but it vaporized 3 council ships that had been in the way. Ambassador Zekthar's flagship went dark. Emergency lights flickered on, but all main systems were offline. The great vessel tumbled through space completely helpless. On the horizon, Daniel watched the flagship fall and felt a mixture of triumph and grief. He had known Scott Peterson. They had served together years ago. Scott had been a good man and a good officer. Now he was gone, but his sacrifice had changed everything. The council fleet was in chaos. Their command ship was disabled. Their formations were broken. The humans had drawn blood and proven they could fight back. All ships press the attack. Target any vessel that breaks formation. Show them we will not surrender. Show them we will not kneel. The battle raged on through the long hours. Earth's forces fought with desperate courage. They lost ships and they lost people, but they kept fighting. Every human pilot and soldier and gunner knew that this was the moment that would define their species forever. They were outmatched and outgunned, but they refused to give up. The battle continued for 6 more hours, and every minute felt like an eternity. Earth's forces fought with everything they had and employed every dirty trick that humanity had ever learned. They mined asteroid fields and lured enemy ships into them. They used civilian communication frequencies to jam military signals. They even managed to hack into some of the Council systems using techniques that bypassed the alien security protocols. The Council had sophisticated defenses, but they were predictable. Humans were not predictable. Humans were desperate, and desperate people fought without rules. Lieutenant Nicole Adams worked at her station on the horizon with sweat running down her face. She had been trying to break into the Council communication network for hours. A team of civilian hackers on Earth, led by a programmer named Jake Morrison, fed her information and code. Together, they searched for any weakness in the alien systems. Then suddenly Nicole found something. A back door in their communications that was protected by encryption that assumed no primitive species would even recognize it existed. But humans were very good at breaking codes. Admiral Cole, I am inside their network. You need to see this immediately. The data that Nicole pulled from the Council systems changed everything. She found thousands of messages between Council ships and their commanders. She found reports from subjugated worlds. She found records of previous conquests. And what those records showed was the truth about the Galactic Council. They were not a legitimate government. They were not even a military alliance. They were a protection racket run by the strongest species in the galaxy. They had banded together thousands of years ago and realized they could control weaker species through fear and intimidation. Every species that joined did so as a slave. Every species that refused was destroyed and used as an example to others. But the most important thing Nicole found was something else entirely. The Council fleet was receiving emergency messages from across the galaxy. Dozens of subjugated worlds were watching this battle. Billions of enslaved beings were seeing humans fight back, and some of them were starting to ask questions. If humans could say no, why could they not say no? If humans could resist, why could they not resist? The cracks in the Council's empire were starting to show. Admiral Patricia Cole read through the intercepted data and understood immediately what it meant. This battle was not just about Earth anymore. It was about every oppressed species in the galaxy. She made a decision that would change the course of history. She opened a communication channel to every ship in the human fleet and to command headquarters on Earth. Broadcast everything we found. Send it on every frequency we can access. Show the galaxy what the Council really is. Show them the truth. Communications Officer Beth Taylor, working from the Horizons Bridge, began transmitting the stolen files across space. The data burst out in all directions. It contained proof of the Council's lies and crimes. It showed how they had maintained power through fear. It revealed their weaknesses and their failures. It exposed the truth that they had hidden for 10,000 years. The effect was immediate and dramatic. On worlds across the galaxy, enslaved populations received the transmission. They saw the Council's internal communications. They learned that the Great Empire was built on deception. They discovered that other species had tried to resist, and those stories had been erased from history. And most importantly, they saw humans fighting back with courage and determination. Within hours, rebellions began sparking on dozens of worlds. Supply lines were cut. Governors were overthrown. Vassal species refused to follow orders. Ambassador Zekthar sat in the dark command chamber of his disabled flagship and watched his empire crumble. Emergency messages flooded in from every corner of Council space. The humans had done more than wound his fleet. They had attacked the very foundation of Council power. They had shown the galaxy that the Emperor had no clothes. Zekthar felt something he had not experienced in decades. He felt fear. The battle around Earth began to change. Some Council ships started breaking formation. Some captains were receiving orders to return home and deal with uprisings. Some crews were questioning why they were fighting to enslave a species that was only defending itself. The unity of the Council fleet fractured. Not completely, but enough to matter. Enough to show that the humans had already won something more important than a military victory. Captain Daniel Carter received new orders from Admiral Cole: cease fire and open a communication channel to all Council vessels. He did not understand at first, but he trusted Patricia's judgment. He nodded to Beth Taylor, who prepared the transmission. Then Patricia Cole's face appeared on every screen in the Council fleet. She looked exhausted and her uniform was stained with smoke, but her voice was strong and clear. Council forces, this message is for you. We do not want to destroy you. We do not want to be your enemies. We only want to be free. Your leaders have lied to you about humanity. They have lied to you about countless other species. We are broadcasting the proof of their crimes for all to see. We are offering you a choice. Any ship that wants to leave this conflict and seek peace is welcome to go. We will not fire on vessels that retreat. We will not pursue those who choose to end this fight. Your quarrel is not with us. Your quarrel is with leaders who use you to oppress others. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Council ships held their positions. But then one vessel near the edge of the formation turned and began moving away from Earth. Then another followed. Then another. Not all of them. Many captains were still loyal or too afraid to disobey, but enough ships left to make the point clear. The Council's grip on its own forces was broken. On his damaged flagship, Zekthar watched ship after ship abandon the battle. He wanted to order them destroyed for desertion, but he had no power to enforce such commands. His fleet was scattered. His authority was gone, and most humiliating of all, he had been defeated by a species that had not even known aliens existed 3 days ago. He slumped in his throne and finally understood what the humans had done. They had not just defended their world. They had started a revolution. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Earth became a symbol of resistance. News of humanity's refusal spread to every corner of known space. The simple word no became a rallying cry for oppressed peoples everywhere. The Council tried to maintain control, but their empire was collapsing. Governors were expelled from planets. Tribute shipments stopped arriving. New alliances formed between species that had been enemies under Council rule. Ambassador Zekthar was arrested by his own people, who had grown tired of serving a corrupt system. He faced trial for crimes against thousands of species. His testimony revealed even more secrets about Council operations. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy, and every species watched as the mighty Council fell apart. Captain Daniel Carter stood on the observation deck of the Horizon months after the battle. Earth floated below him, peaceful and blue and free. Beside him, Commander Lisa Raymond smiled for the first time in weeks. Her red hair was loose around her shoulders and she looked relaxed. We did it. We actually did it, Daniel shook his head slowly. No, they did it. Lieutenant Commander Scott Peterson and everyone else who sacrificed everything. The pilots who flew suicide missions. The soldiers who held their ground against impossible odds. All the ordinary people who refused to surrender even when surrender seemed like the only rational choice. Down on Earth, life was returning to normal, but nothing would ever truly be the same. Helen Martinez walked through the park with her daughter and looked up at the stars without fear. Kevin Yamamoto returned to his engineering work, designing ships for exploration instead of war. Paul Henderson taught his students about the day humanity stood up to tyranny, and won not through superior weapons, but through courage and determination. New ships arrived in Earth orbit almost daily. They came from species that had thrown off Council rule. They came seeking alliance and friendship. They came to meet the humans who had changed the galaxy with one simple word. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges began. Humanity joined the community of free species not as subjects but as equals. Admiral Patricia Cole retired from military service and wrote a book about the events. She called it The Power of No. In it, she explained how sometimes the most important thing a person or a species could do was refuse to accept injustice. The book was translated into hundreds of alien languages and read across the galaxy, and on 1,000 oppressed worlds, people told the story of Earth to their children. They spoke about the day the humans received an impossible demand and gave an impossible answer. They taught their young ones that freedom was worth fighting for. They passed down the lesson that one word spoken with courage could change everything. That word was no.